question number 17. Some people say that Leviticus doesn't actually ban homosexuality, but instead just pedophilic relationships with boys. Is this true? Okay, so there are people out there that want to take a look at passages in the Old Testament, specifically Leviticus, and they want to say, no, this is really not talking about how homosexuality is wrong. Instead, is what, the question that was posed here, this is just banning pedophilic relationships with boys. And so, it's more like, child abuse type things.
Well, homosexuality, it was taught to be wrong even in the New Testament.
Well, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. And there's other things too, and that is that, some people, in fact, I looked at one thing last night, and they were saying, oh, well, it's not the homosexuality, it's the rape, it's the cultic worship. Is a cultic worship? What are you talking about? Well, back in the Old Testament days, and in the New Testament days too, when you had idol worship, especially when fertility was involved in a man, not a woman. Women were forbidden for such things, but a man could go to this temple, and by having sex with a temple prostitute, that would be a worship of this goddess or god of fertility. And oftentimes the prostitutes would either be male or female, and somebody can have their pick. And so, people will say, well, it's not the homosexuality part, it's the idea about you're worshiping this false god. That is the problem with it. And so, there's all kinds of different things that people look at and say, well, it's really this. And so this one guy that I was reading last night, he said something about, the people make theological assumptions about, or the people who say that homosexual behavior in these passages of scriptures are just evil themselves, are making theological assumptions about things. Instead, we're going to make our theology from the Bible itself. Okay? So going on that, let's take a look at one of these passages, and you just be the judge for yourself. Who is assuming what? Okay? So let's take a look at Leviticus chapter 18. All right, so in Leviticus chapter 18, your Bible may say, my Bible says at the very beginning of Leviticus chapter 18, unlawful sexual relations. And you notice is that if we read the first couple of verses of this, you notice that the Lord said to Moses, speak to the Israelites and say to them, I am the Lord your God. You must not do as they do in Egypt, where you used to live, and you must not do as they do in the land of Canaan, where I am bringing you. Do not follow their practices. Okay? And so, hi.
Simon.
How are you?
Simon.
You want to come see me?
Simon.
Come here. Oh. There we go. All right. Okay. So, you must not follow the practices, all right? So they're coming out of Egypt. They're going into Canaan. And, by the way, is it okay for your kid to be on the internet? Because he is. Anyway, so, coming out of Egypt, going to the land of Canaan. And so God is saying, I don't want you to be like those people, and I don't want you to be like those people either. The people in Egypt were people who were very, very wicked, and the Lord judged them. And the people of Canaan were very, very wicked, and the Lord was going to use the Israelites to judge them as well. And when you kind of look at the practice of the Canaanites, I mean, there were some really, really bad, despicable things in there. For example, it's talking about in verse number 21 about, do not give any of your children to be sacrificed to Moloch, for you must not profane the name of the Lord of your God. I am the Lord. I mean, child sacrifice, which I would never do to this little guy right here. He's too sweet. In fact, I wouldn't do it to any of them. But you know, if you think about it, back in that day and time, what some people would do is they'd take their own children, they would sacrifice them to false gods, and some of them would even sacrifice them by burning them alive in a sacrifice. If you really want to get terrible and graphic about it, sometimes men would. There you go. Okay, you want to go back now? My object lesson is.
I don't like that object lesson.
Okay. Oh. Here, let's go back to Daddy. You want to go back to Daddy? Oh. Anyway, I won't go into other practices because they actually get even worse from there. Okay? And so, so the whole basis of this is just simply, I don't want you to do what the other people of the land are doing. All right? Now, look at verse number 22. It says, do not lie with a man as one lies with a woman that is detestable. Okay? Now, do you see anything in there about pedophilic relationships with boys? You really don't. Do you see anything in there about, you know, the whole idea about temple prostitutes and everything like that? I understand that verse number 21 is talking about sacrifice to Molech, but at the same time, if you look at all the rest of these, and there's a lot of other things in there too, not just simply about homosexuality, but other things that are really bad. Verse 13, do not have sexual relations with your mother's sister because she is your mother's close relative. Do not dishonor your father's brother by approaching his wife to have sexual relations. She is your aunt. Do not have sexual relations with your daughter-in-law. She is your son's wife. Do not have relations with her. Do not have sexual relations with your brother's wife. That would dishonor your brother. Do not have sexual relations with both a woman and her daughter. Do not have sexual relations with either her son's daughter or her daughter's daughter. They are her close relative. I mean, when you look at all of that, you don't see any of that, do you? Okay? And so you can't really say that this passage, and there's, you know, another one in Leviticus too, that it's really just simply talking about that, right? I mean, I think that what we have to do is we just have to make it what it is. And that's just the way it is. And accept it. And to tell you the truth, this kind of goes back to really how people look at the Bible, period. Right? And it doesn't just simply have to be about this topic. It can be about any topic. When you look at the Bible in any light, any topic, and the Bible is telling you something that you don't want to accept, what do people have to do? One of two things. Either the Bible's not right and I reject it, or that part of the Bible isn't right and I'm going to change it to make it fit and suit whatever it is. And, you know, hey, look, this is the way it is with every single part of the Bible, right? It's not just simply about that. And so I think that, you know, in today's time, you know, there's going to be people who, you know, not trying to question their sincerity or their motivation at all. It could be that they really are Christians. It could be that they really love the Lord, but, you know, they just don't like that part. And so, therefore, we need to change that part to make it more acceptable to us. And really, we don't need to change things about God to make it more acceptable to us. We need to take our lives and we need to change our lives to make it more acceptable to God. Okay? The other part of that question is, are there other passages in the Bible that speak against homosexuality? And there are. The other argument that I've heard is, well, that's in the Old Testament. And the Old Testament law was fulfilled by Jesus Christ. And so, therefore, you know, that's like, you know, eating meat, unclean meat, and so on and so forth. We don't have to worry about that. But actually, there's places in the New Testament that talk about it as well. So let's go on over to the book of Romans chapter 1. Romans chapter 1 and 1 Corinthians chapter 6 are two of the passages that I go to. That, I mean, because to me it's just clear as clear can be. But in Romans chapter 1, this is what we find. Now, if you remember a couple weeks ago, I talked about how Romans chapter 1, it was talking about how the wrath of God, and this is verse number 18, is revealed against heaven from all ungodliness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness. And then it talking about how the ancient Gentile world was suppressing the truth of God, that they worshiped and served the created thing rather than the Creator. Okay? And so we talked about that. I think that was even last week when we talked about it. But it goes on to talk about how this ancient Gentile world that Paul was talking about gave up the knowledge of God. And when they gave up the knowledge of God, then they started to accept the lie about what idolatry was. And when they started to do that, then God just simply gave them over to all kinds of things that God didn't want. And so when you notice, you skip on down into verse number 26, it says, because of this, God gave them over to their shameful lust. Even women exchanged natural desires for unnatural ones. In the same way, men also abandoned the natural relations with women and were inflamed with lust for one another. Men committed indecent acts with other men and received in themselves the due penalty for their perversion. So some people say, well, wait a minute, that is just talking about that, temple prostitute and everything like that. But if you continue to read on down, it talks about a whole lot of other things there as well. Okay? If you continue on down, it says they talk about this ancient Gentile world had become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, depravity. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. They admit ways of doing evil. They disobey their parents. They are senseless, faithless, heartless, ruthless. And so, is any of that list having to do with like temple prostitution and false religion? No, it isn't. Okay? And by the way, I think that a lot of times we Christians, we like to jump on homosexuality as it is the only sin that is out there, and it is just such a terrible sin. But keep in mind, there's a lot of other sins out there as well, right? That we've got to be aware of. And so here's this ancient Gentile world and what's going on with them. And, in chapter 1, he's talking about the Gentiles and how the Gentiles are under judgment of God. And then he comes along in chapter 2 talking about how the Jews are in judgment of the Lord. And so it kind of all sums up in chapter 3 and verse number 23 by saying that all have sinned. Both Jews and Gentiles, everyone has sinned, and they have fallen short of the glory of God. Okay? All right. Does anybody have any other questions about that?